Welcome back, everyone. Now we can move on to our second part, which is developing in Spotfire. You have to develop in Spotfire Analyst. You cannot do this in Spotfire Web. However, the writeback can be executed from Spotfire Web as well. And as the first step, we are not going to create a connection the conventional way through connecting to Amazon Redshift. Instead, we will create a data source in the information designer and then create information links on that data source. So let's go ahead and click on the data tab, and all the way down is the information designer. So let's click on that. Then click new and data source. Let's name our data source Redshift Database. For the type, we select the Redshift, of course. And for the connection URL, you use the same connection that you would use for connecting to the database through your database management tool. However, you have to follow the format that is displayed in here. So start with the JDBC Redshift, then you use your URL, and don't forget to add in the port and also the database name. So I'm gonna go ahead and copy mine in. All right, for the number of connections, I'm going to leave it as it is. For minimum number of connections, 1, and maximum 1 as well. The username is mandatory. For me, it is AVS user. And for the password and user authentication, it is not mandatory. However, if you wish to have the credentials and type in the credentials every time you open up the application, then you can add in your password here and check the user authentication, but I do not want to do that. And so I'm going to leave that as blank. I already have created this data source. Therefore, I'm not going to click save, but go ahead and click on save. Now, as you have it saved, you can find that data source either under the data sources tab, or if you saved it, you can also save it into your folder and you can find it there. But it appears at both places, so it depends on you whether you like it more under the data sources or in your personal folder. Okay, so now we can go ahead into our data source and we want to create elements, our column elements for our tables. So how do we do that? So let's expand the data source that we just created and find our two tables, employees and employees changed. Under the employees, let's right click and create column elements. And we can see our 4 columns: ID, name, position, employee status. In the bottom right corner, click on create columns. And now in your folder, the good practice is to create a separate folder for each table, basically, where you will be creating the elements. So in my folder content for videos, I'm going to create a new folder. So right click, new folder. And I'm going to name it as tab for table employees. I already have it, but go ahead and click OK. And in the tab employees, I will create the columns. Then let's do the same process for our employees changed table. Right click, create column elements. Now, as you can see, we have the 2 more, time of change and comment. Create columns. Again, let's create a folder. Let's name it tab employees changed. And click OK. And when you have your folder employees changed, go ahead and create the columns. Now we have our columns in our folders, so we can go ahead and create our information links. So let's go to new information link. And now we will add those elements that we just created into the information link. So as you can see, I am clicked on the employees folder. So let's go ahead and add those elements. And we can go ahead and click Save. Navigate to your folder, Content for Videos, and let's name it Information Link, Employees. And click Save. But again, I have it, so I'm not going to save it. And you can check basically what this information link does in the SQL tab here. And it is just a select statement. So basically taking everything from the employees table from our database. If you wish to put some where conditions in here, you can, but I do not need to put any in. Let's do the exact same process for our employees change table. So new information link. Click on your employees changed folder. Add the elements. Click on save. Navigate to your folder. And name it information link employees changed. And go ahead and save. When you have these two information links, we are going to create the third one, the most important one, which is the writeback information link. So once again, click on new information link. And now, because we are writing back to the employees change table, we are going to take an element from this folder again. But we technically do not need any elements here because we do not care about displaying any data from this information link, because this information link is going to be only writing back. But for a successful information link, for a working information link, we need an element here, because as you can see, I cannot save this right now. So either I could put again all of the elements, or I could, for just the simplicity, just for example, add ID element. And now there comes a little change from creating the previous information links, which is we have to go into the SQL. We can leave the query as it is. And in the pre-updates, we are going to call the procedure that we created in the first part, the procedure that is now in our database. We do that by the statement call name of our procedure, proc Spotfire writeback, open close brackets. And inside these brackets, as you remember, we have the parameters. And we are going to do the exact same in here, with the difference that here we will not specify the data type, and each parameter needs to have a question mark in front of it. That is the way how Spotfire defines a parameter. So I'm going to go ahead and copy the parameters, put them in. So as you can see, the names of the parameters stay exactly the same as the parameter names in our procedure in our database, just with the difference that there is a question mark in front of them. You can click OK. Now you can check these parameters under the parameters tab. Click on refresh and they all appear here. They have by default the data type string and the value type as single value. You can see what options you have by clicking on edit. There is not that many, but for now we will leave everything as string, even though, for example, ID and the time of change is timestamp, but we will leave it as string, because when it is string here and is written back to our procedure, which is taking the proper data type, it is going to be integer and varchar and timestamp. So here it can stay as string. And as well, even though we want to have the multiple selection option, marking multiple rows in our table, we do not need to specify array here. We can leave it single value. All right, and when you have this, go ahead and click on save. Find your folder, and let's name it information link employees changed writeback. And let's go ahead and click on save. And when you have all these three information links created, then basically we have our backend part completed. And by backend, I mean our connection between our database and our Spotfire. All right, let's go ahead now and add our information links as data tables. So let's click onto the data tab, add data. Now browse your destination folder where you saved your information links. Click on the information link employees. Okay. Now let's visualize it. So go to the visualization types table and it's there. Now let's do the same process again for our employees changed. By default, it wants to add as rows to our employees table. We do not want that. We want to have it as a separate table. So let's click the option add as new data table and click OK. Let's visualize it again. And it automatically detects a new data table. All right, let's rename these two to employees and employees changed. Employees changed. We can reorder our columns. Let's put ID first, name, position, and employee state to the last. ID, name, position, status, okay. We can resize columns to fit. Can do that here as well. Now we can add a title to our page. So let's go ahead and click on text area. Move our employees change down. If you do not want the title, then you can skip this part. We do not want to have a title there. If I would uncheck this show title bar option, then I would not have the option to drag it around. As you can, let's see, you see, but I can still have it there. It's gonna create a little blank margin basically at the top, but I do not care about that at the moment. Let's right click and edit HTML. Let's write in here H1 as for heading 1, Spotfire to Redshift Database Writeback. The heading can give it a little style to put it in the center with some CSS. And we can also create a little bit more of the top margin. Let's do 50 pixels. That should be enough. Text align. Enter. Let's save it. Now here we have our title. Let's create one more area, and that text area is going to contain our controls. So let's click on text area. Let's move it down. And let's move employees change right here. All right, so it's nice and neat. Again, we do not want the title here. Once again, click on edit HTML. Very first thing we are going to do is to add a button that is going to be submitting. So when the user clicks this button, the writeback is going to execute. So you can create a button under the insert action control. It's set by default to button. Let's name it submit. Let's append a script to it. So click on script, new. Let's name it writeback. If you wish, you can put a description in here. So let's say a script executing the database writeback. And for now, we will leave it as blank, but we will get back to it later. Let's click OK, click OK again. And now we have our submit button. For the next thing, we are going to create a comment. So let's put an input field, create a new document property. And this document property, basically what the user writes into it, is going to be taken and passed on to the comment value in the IronPython script and then into the database. So let's name it a comment property. And we can leave it as string and value and description empty. Okay, click OK. That is our comment. And then let's create one more. And this one is going to be a drop-down list, also under the property control. And with this drop-down list, what we are going to do is to have the ability to change the employed status. So when the employee is an employee, we can set it when he no longer works for us to a no, to N. And when the employee is not working for us, but let's say he comes back or she, then we can set the N to Y. So it's a new employee again. So let's create a new property. Let's name it status property. And again, string and description and value empty. Now what we are going to do is to put values into the property. And we could either do the unique values in column. So it would automatically put the drop-down list as N or Y. But let's say that some business users are going to be using this and they might not understand what the N or Y means. So we could use fixed values and give it a more descriptive name for these values. So let's say for our value yes, we could name it as is an employee, going to be for Y, and for N like is not an employee for N. Let's click OK. And we have our drop-down list created. We can also style this to have it in the center, looking a little bit better. So let's put our property controls into a div. We are basically putting them in like a box. And we can style the whole box now. Okay, so let's put it center. And we can also, if we want, let's save this. Now you can see we have it in the center. We can also do a little thing to give a instruction to the user. So let's say change the employed status attribute here and or add a comment. Click save. Okay. And one more thing what we can do in this table is to get rid of the legend so it is not distracting. And this is what our interface would look like. It is very simple, very straightforward, not really pretty, but it serves the purpose. Alright, let's now move on to our last part, which is creating the IronPython script. This IronPython script will be handling all the logic of the writeback, meaning that it's going to be referencing the marked rows, taking each value from each column, appending the status attribute, appending what is written in here in the input field. When the user clicks the submit button, it executes the information link that is writing back into our database, and it's going to reload and show those new written rows in here in the employees change. So let's go ahead and open our script that we already created. I have it under the manage trust and script. However, if you have the newer 11 Spotfire version, you will find it under the document properties. Let's go ahead and open it up. All right, the very first thing we have to do is to import our libraries that we need in order to successfully execute the script. And again, as I mentioned before, all of this code you can find in the gist link in the description below. And I will be doing some explanation along as I'm not going to be writing the whole code right now word by word, but I'm going to be copy pasting it in blocks and doing some explanation. So if you are interested in that, then feel free to follow along. All right, so the very first thing we are going to do after we have imported the libraries is to define our variables for our document properties that we created, the status property and comment property. All right, so I named them status value and comment value, and our two document properties are status property and comment property. Next, we will define our data tables. Our data tables are information link employees and information link employees changed. And I named them data table and data table 2. Next up, we'll create data cursors. And these data cursors are going to be taking the current values that are in our columns ID, name, and position. So I name them ID cursor, name cursor, position cursor, and we define it that the ID cursor should be looking at the data table and the ID column. And again, name cursor should be looking at the data table and the name column. All right. Next, we will retrieve our marking selection. So when the user marks the row or rows, then the IronPython script is going to know upon which data table we are marking, and I name it markings, and we have to specify that we are doing this marking on our data table, which is our employees table. Next, we have to iterate through the rows of the data table to retrieve the marked ones and assign the proper values. And we will do this with a for loop. So do not forget the indentation. So on our data table, on our employees table, we are retrieving the markings. We specify the index. We are setting the index, otherwise the marking would return it at random. So it would be all scattered around. Then we are defining the cursors. And we are defining values 1 to 6 for all of our columns that are going to be going into the employees changed table. So for our ID, name, and position, we are using the current value that is in the table. For our status and comment, we are using our document properties. And for our value 6, we are taking the current date that is right now also with time. So when the user submits and clicks the button, submit button, the current time is going to be appended to that row, to that value. And we can print it to see exactly what time it is. Next, we have to pass these values as objects into array because parameters are not single value objects. They, as you know, they have a value and they also have a data type. And for this, we need to pass these values in as objects, as array objects. And this also allows us to select multiple rows, but only with single values if it would not work. Okay, let's fix the indentation. We need to pass it on as array objects. I name it short for parameter value 1, parameter value 2, so parval1. And to those objects, we assign the respective value. Next, we will create a list. And into this list, we will pass on the parameters. And then, because we are creating this list, we can then append all at once and not one by one. Again, correct the indentation. All right. And now for the next step, we'll provide the parameters in our information links with these parameter values, with these objects that we just created. Okay, so again, I name them IL-param1, short for information link parameter 1, information link parameter 2. And to name them, we use the exact same name as we created in the information link already, in the information designer. And we assign it the object, the array object, the parameter value 1, etc. And then for each one, we append it to our list. We append our information link parameter to our list. For the next step, we have to reference our information link. All right. So for our information link data source, we have to use the ID of our information link. And how you get this ID is you go into the information designer, you find your writeback information link, you right click on it, and there is an option called copy ID. It copies to your clipboard, then you come back to the edit script and you paste in your information link ID. Okay, we are almost done. The next step, we are now appending these parameters to our information link data source. And because we put them in the list, then we can do it all at once. So to our information link data source, for the parameters, we are specifying everything that we have in our list, all the parameters that are in our list. Next up, we will create a temporary data table. This is a crucial step because otherwise, without creating a data table, Spotfire would not be able to execute this data write back. So it needs to be the data source, the information link data source needs to be appended to a data table. Still in the for loop, so be aware of the indentation. So we are adding a data table. I called it temp as for temporary. And as for the data that it is taking, it is the data from our information link data source. Now, because it is a temporary one, we can go ahead and right away remove it. And for our final step, that one is not in the for loop anymore, is to refresh our data tables. Because if you would not refresh, you would submit the button, you would click the button, but it will not appear on your screen in the employees changed table right away. You would have to go into the data tab and reload the data. But with this statement, it's going to automatically reload the moment you click on the submit button. We can go ahead and go to run script. And it executed successfully, but we do not have any rows marked right now. Therefore, we can go ahead and close our script. Let's go, for example, mark Sophie. And let's select that she is an employee. Let's type test into our comment. Click submit. And as you can see, that our row got append it to the employees change table. And if now you would go back to your database management tool and open up your employees change table, you will see exactly this one row is in the table. So the data write back was executed successfully. Thank you for watching. I hope you found this video helpful and learned something. If you did, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. If you have any suggestions for similar tutorials and educational Spotfire videos, you can leave a comment down below. I wish you a nice rest of your day and take care.